All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining, and thank you for Modern Sales Pros for having us all for this webinar. We are going to be discussing mastering sales leadership in the wild world of fellow sales pros. I'm excited for today's session. We're going to dig into, I think, some of the joys, pitfalls, also tips and tricks of selling to other sales professionals. We'll also talk about some of the unique tactics our four orgs have employed over the course of the past year. We'll talk about building a team that's committed to staying as agile as the market has become. We want you leaving this to discover some strategies to thrive in a market where you are your own ICP. This will be led by seasoned sales leaders, and hopefully this conversation will equip you with the skills you need to excel for the rest of this year. And to do that, we have panelists representing various roles of companies at various stages. So we have C-level from Series B orgs, revenue leaders from Series A and B companies, and then an exec at a company much further down the financial alphabet at Series F as well. So really quickly, before I get into introductions of the panelists, I'll introduce myself. My name is Tom Rowe. I'm the SVP of Sales at Chili Piper. Chili Piper at its core is an advanced scheduling and routing solution. The intent is to get qualified prospects and customers directly to the right salesperson as quickly as possible, solving the challenge of getting a form fill and ultimately chasing those people to never meet with half the folks that fill out something on your pricing page. Chili Piper seeks to solve that for you. Worth noting, I lead our account executive, account management, and SDR functions, of course, in conjunction with a very talented sales leadership team. So I'm going to go from the top of my screen down. Andy Champion, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to introduce yourself.
So, hey, Tom, lovely to meet you. I'm the guy with the F, which kind of describes much of my school career as well. So, yeah, HighSpot is Series F. I run HighSpot's business outside of North America, so I'm responsible for around about 130 people across various countries in EMEA, Australia, and New Zealand. My background, about 25, 26 years in sales and sales leadership in the tech and SaaS industry. And, you know, in terms of HighSpot, for those people that don't know what HighSpot is or what we do, we are a sales enablement technology, which is a really fancy way of saying that we help sales leaders and sales reps understand what to know, say, show, and do in those critical moments in front of their customers and prospects. Ultimately, it's about driving up revenue. Ultimately, that's measured through driving up win rates, loss no decision down, and driving quota attainment. Delighted to be here.
Beautiful. Below Andy on my screen, I have Puyan. Puyan, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to introduce yourself and Scratchpad, of course.
Awesome, Tom. Thanks for leading this. Hi, everyone. I'm Puyan Salahid. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Scratchpad, and we unlock higher performance for sales teams. That's really it's really about execution, and the way we do that, though, is through simplicity. We make pipeline management, forecasting, and deal inspection just simple. And by making it simple, that seems to have a pretty big impact on people actually doing it and doing it well. So we're a Series B company. We have sales people from all sorts of organizations, public companies, startups, everything in between, selling enterprise, mid-market, SMBs, and it's been a lot of fun building this.
Awesome. Beautiful intro, even better hat. Andrew, we're going to pass it over to you for the intro then as well.
Awesome. As well, thanks again, Tom, for hosting, and Puyan and Andy, great to be here with you guys as well. So Andrew Bothell, I'm the SVP of Revenue at Rattle. We're a Series A company right now. I lead all sales and customer success and SDRs and partnerships at Rattle. And we are the revenue automation cloud. So we bring collaboration, data, and hygiene into where your employees work today. So think about Slack and Microsoft Teams, and think about all your large enterprise systems that you need to get data into, and you need that collaboration to happen. We bring that all into Slack and Teams today. So if you think about, we'll talk about this today actually some. If you think about there's 5 people inside a team that have to work on a deal inside a company. How do you get those five team members to collaborate efficiently, effectively, and get your reps to take the right actions using signals and artificial intelligence? We just signed a partnership with Gong, bringing those meetings directly into Slack and Teams so that the teams can collaborate, therefore driving more efficiency, more revenue, more collaboration across your organization. So super excited to be here. Similar to Andy, I've been leading teams for the last 20 years at companies like WalkMe and Zendesk. I'm super excited to be here today as well.
Wonderful. Well, to kick it off, it looks like all of us either are in sales leadership capacities or came from sales leadership capacities. And I think our persona can be relatively challenging. I think if you think of ourselves as software buyers, we could probably attest to that. So let's talk briefly about what to do differently when selling to sales pros. Andy, I'm going to start with you. You've been selling to the sales space for years. So what do you need to bring to the table when selling to salespeople that's different than other personas? And apologies for saying years. That was not intended to date you at all.
You probably tell by the lack of hair. So come on, there's no secrets here. So there's a couple of things that I think are really important to start with. And I'm going to start with something that I think applies to all personas, right? But especially to the sales persona. And there's a natural instinct, I think, that's trained in all of us to sell the benefits of what we do. I was just listening to the wonderful introductions thinking, oh my God, our organization could benefit from a whole bunch of that. And we're naturally drawn to the positive impacts. But there's a lot of information, there's a lot of studies out there that talk about the relative likelihood of positive impacts versus the risk of negative impacts. And it turns out that risk aversion is twice as powerful in terms of people being inclined to make a decision, or dare I say it, not make a decision, as positive impacts. So maybe a bit contentious, but whilst we're all thinking about selling the benefits of what our companies do, when we're weaving in those value propositions in terms of, as I talked about, those precious moments in front of the customer, I think it's always important to stop and think, probably prior to the meeting, prior to the conversation, what are the reasons why this person would not buy? What are the risks that they are going to take potentially by putting their head above the parapet? And how do I work with them? How do I partner with them to give them the confidence, the information that when somebody calls them out on it, they're actually willing to fight my corner in all of those conversations that we're not in, right? Again, we're probably as salespeople, we're in maybe 20% of the conversations, maybe less than that, which lead up to a decision. So how do you arm your key personas, especially the sales persona, for those 80% of conversations when you're not there, in a way that really entices them to want to put their head above the parapet and take a risk on bringing your solution into their organization?
That's great. Yeah, I think we've all heard, I think 2/3 of sales is done to solve pain, right? But pain is a much more pronounced emotion and likely something to drive a lot more action than optimization, something on the other side of that coin. So totally agree. Andrew, you sold at, I think, Speckett and WalkMe previously. I don't think revenue leaders or RevOps leaders were necessarily your persona there. So what have you noticed as the difference during your time at Rattle selling to these personas?
Yeah, I would actually say like at Speckett, we did sell to RevOps and enablement leaders. But I think, a few things. It is a tough sale at the end of the day. So for those that are here for the series, like, we have empathy for you. But I think what's most important though is like, you need to bring something to the table. Like, at the end of the day, if you just look at the four of us on this call, we all have years of experience and perspective. And if you're showing up to tell me you're going to improve my win rates or increase my pipeline, like, we're all probably saying that in some perspective in regards to our marketing and everything else. But when you show up, we're looking to learn something, right? We're looking to learn a new perspective, a new way of doing things. And you need to come in with that perspective. And to Andy's point, that starts with having some type of hypothesis, right? Having some type of understanding about who I am, what my business does, and what problems I potentially can solve. And that's going to vary based off the segment you're selling into, whether it's SMB, mid-market, enterprise, maybe a little easier because there's 10Ks, 10Qs out there that you can go review and get some insights to how the business is thinking. But you have to come in with that perspective and own it at the end of the day. And I think that's really important. And again, I'll piggyback off what Andy said, because I think he said really well, especially in this selling environment, right? There's a lot of negative impact that we can't control, whether it's we don't have budget, or, hey, purchasing's on hold, we're waiting to see what happens in the economy and all these other things. But you need to come with that perspective of like what you can help them solve for today. And if you bring that perspective, you will have a better opportunity to actually drive a deal, or at least drive next steps in that opportunity to at least educate them, because there is a lot of education going on in the marketplace. And one thing I would tell sales leaders, sales reps, like, there is a long tail impact. You know, like, there's not every deal is going to move through your pipeline and funnel, but how do you set yourself up for some long-term success, especially as you maybe go into next year, of like, hey, if I can go educate Tom on what we do and bring a new perspective, maybe the timing is not right now, but if I come and earn that respect with that perspective, I might be able to sell to Tom in a quarter or 2 quarters or 3 quarters when the time's right.
Yeah, people are portable and decisions are temporary, right? So the quality of the work you do in a sales process tends to come back to you quarters or years down the road. It's part of the reason why tenured salespeople are often higher performing. It's not always just a skill gap. It's because of the Rolodex they've built over time. The no's they got 2 years ago become yeses today, either at that org or a different one. Puyan, same question to you. Unique challenges or pros of selling to salespeople?
So, yeah, I guess I'll take it a little bit more tactical, but I agree with everything Andy and Andrew said. Listen, I think selling to sales leaders, there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of things that go well. Like, a lot of times, if you do it right, they'll just help you with the discovery. They'll be like, okay, I'm your deal champion. This person is going to be your blocker. This is this. I'll map the org for you. Like, all of that stuff, they just know they've done it. But the flip side to that, though, is the expectations are a heck of a lot higher. And I was talking to a CRO recently who was telling me about an experience that they had with somebody trying to sell them. And they were like, I would never buy from that company, even though they had a decent product, but the sales experience from the salesperson was so bad that they took that as a reflection of how the organization is being run. And so that bar being a lot higher means you, as the account executive or the manager supporting that AE, you have to be operating at a much, much higher level. You have to be on point. Your game has to be sharp, because you are speaking to a sales pro. You are speaking to somebody, a lot of sales leaders have been there. And if they've got that tenure, they've been through a lot. You don't make it to have tenure in sales without seeing some serious things go sideways and upside down. So no cutting corners, no shortcuts, right? You've got to be sharp and you got to be on point.
Yeah. I think there's some pros as well, and you alluded to a lot of them, Puyan. I think the candor that we can leverage selling to other sales leaders is an actual benefit. Not only can I be candid as the seller to explain why I can or can't meet somebody on their commercials, but also the candor I'll receive in return of, like, the likelihood for the deal to close, the steps that need to be taken. Certainly the sales leaders that you sell to go through all those same processes. So I feel like you're not as likely to get dragged along. But to some extent, Puyan, they're holding a mirror in front of you. You need to come correct if you're going to sell to salespeople. Andy, I think you had something to add.
Yeah, I was going to say, and getting really tactical about this, because at the end of the day, what we want is the audience to take away some things that they can take back to their teams, or for the individual contributors that are with us, things that they can do. I think Puyan's absolutely right. And here's the thing: when you're dealing with sales leaders, and actually I would say broadly, the more senior you get, the less waffle you need. Be direct, be punchy, know what the points are, and use small, simple words. You don't have to impress me with big words. In fact, the more big words you use and the more tech jargon, the more I'm starting to smell a bit of a whiff, and that's going to turn me off real quick. Small, simple words, short sentences, and be ruthlessly direct, because most salespeople are going to respond and respect that.
Yep. Directness is kindness. Absolutely agree. I think the 4 years prior to 2022, the run on the industry that we're all in was relatively unprecedented. That's caused there to be more software companies and thus more salespeople reaching out to an increasingly finite group of folks like us, software buyers. So I want to think about the last year, where I think we've all encountered some challenges over the course of the past 4 quarters, and talk about what, if anything, you or your orgs have done that have been novel or unique, new tactics that you've put into the field that have paid off well for you. I'd like to start. I started with Andy last time. Andrew, I'd like to hear from you. What are some unique strategies that you and the team at Rattle are employing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think we all know that you need to build a champion, right? And sometimes we'd love to be at the CRO or the VP of sales, and sometimes it might take a few steps to get there. And I think too often, especially now, and as I said before, this economic climate where we're hearing, hey, we don't have budget, like this sounds interesting and everything else. It's how do you actually spend some time building a champion versus just running your process? And so I think having some flexibility on how you go drive that process, and the teams that have worked underneath me, like love Medic, love the metrics, love the data in Salesforce, love the deal reviews and everything from that perspective. But in this world today, like you need to go prove your value, especially with so much going on in sales tech. There's a lot of platforms and a lot of people using similar messaging and everything else. How do you differentiate yourself? And so one thing that we've really focused on over the last 6 months since I joined Rattle was like not just sticking to the stringent process, but building a champion, building that first champion in order to get to the right additional buyers in that cycle. And not just feeling like I'm coming into the call and I know the playbook is, hey, we're going to do a call, we're going to do a demo, and then I'm going to ask to get to Andy because he's your VP. Let's build a mutual plan together to get you confidence so that when you spend that other 80% of the time internally selling Rattle, you're confident in our capabilities. And so we use what we call like an assisted PLG motion. We get people in our product. We're confident in our pricing, but we're making sure that as that champion is going to go loop into Andy, they're as confident as we are in the pains and most importantly, the problems we can solve. So it's not just about deep discovery or interrogation. It's about mutually coming up with a plan, mutually uncovering the pains and solution we can provide for them, and then coming up with that plan of like, how do we go navigate this through your organizations? Because especially Rattle, like we touch the SDR organization, we touch the account executive organization, we touch the CS organization, and those are all different problems and different personas. And yes, the CRO has a higher level, but we need to make multiple people successful using our technology. And again, another piece that I would say too is like leveraging your customer success organization.
Yeah, can you tell me more about that? I'll little peek behind the curtain. We did share some notes before this, and you mentioned leveraging customer success in new logo sales, which I think is typically a point that doesn't land particularly well, at least in my experience. So I'm personally very curious to see how you do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to find balance, right? Because you don't. I'm a big believer people need to have focus and purpose and understand like what their roles inside your organization are. And context switching can become complex, but we've really mapped it out to where we'll bring our CS team into what we call like a proof of value, and really help the customer and prospects understand like this is more than just a product. Like we really pride ourselves as a customer to provide a great customer experience. So that way they have a taste of what it's going to be like when they do move forward. They have a taste of like what it's going to be like when they have a question or when they need support or they want to understanding around a best practice. And so it's just not a salesperson or one of our solutions engineer doing that. It's somebody that focuses on the health and best practices with our customers on a regular basis. And so we really leverage our CS team to help provide some of that experience. And I'm not saying that's for like every single one of our deals, but it is a differentiator, especially as you start moving up market, the higher end of, commercial and especially into the enterprise space where there is, longer cycles and more relationship building and, you have 10 people involved. So it is something that I think can be a real strong advantage for organizations if you can program it right. You don't want too many people involved.
Yeah, especially in a world with dedicated CSMs, for example. You can't, in the new logo process, sell snake oil as a CSM when you're going to spend the next 12, 24, or 36 months with that group. So I think that's a nice way to handle it. Puyan, what about unique strategies for you in 2022 or 2023 as you've been reaching scale or I think expanding beyond that?
It's not going to really be time specific. I've kind of lost track of years now.
Time's a flat circle, right? Yeah.
So it feels like everything's changing every month, if not every week right now. But I think, one, I'll plus everything Andrew said. I think that's spot on. And two things there. One, qualifying really, really well. So just going back to the fundamentals, I think prior to things taking a turn, it was kind of a frenzy. even customers that shouldn't have really been customers could become customers. Everyone was in a, okay, growth is really what matters mindset. So I don't think like great qualification was as top of mind, or like just straight up great fundamentals of sales, right? So I won't repeat all of those. I think everyone here knows for the most part what they are, but qualifying really, really well. The second part is, I guess, building on what Andrew said, but I think looking at what you're delivering and creating an experience for somebody that stands out. So one tactic, you certainly bring CSMs in. Other tactics could be, there's a lot of other things you could do, but the key message there is that people buy from people. I still believe that, and we've been in situations where people will buy because they had a better experience. There is so much noise in the sales tech world. There's so much noise in the marketing tech world, security world. Like literally any market you look at, right? Any vertical, there are more companies. There is more noise, and there aren't that many differentiated messages. So another vector that you can differentiate on is that buying experience, and making that a part of the culture, making that a part of, not just the CSMs, but really everyone on the org and the way that they can contribute to it.
Yeah, I think university sales processes suggest university support once you sign up, so it doesn't inspire quite a lot of confidence. Andy, I'll let you round out this question about something unique you've put in the field in the last year or before that.
So I agree. Whether we like it or not, the sales experience that our individual contributors deliver to our customers and our prospective customers, whether they're on the CSM side, AE side, AM side, ADR, BDR, SDR, across the entire organization, that is one of the biggest predictors of winning and retaining customers. And there's no getting away from it. So absolutely work hard at that. And the way to work hard at that, I think, for the people on this call is to, and here's the thing, it's free. It costs nothing. And it's called coaching. It's called coaching and deliberate practice. It's taking time with your individual contributors to help them turn up in the best way that they can when they're in those precious moments in front of the customer. And that doesn't just magically happen. It takes deliberate effort and it takes deliberate practice. So if you're not role-playing, start role-playing. Start having fun internally. It's the toughest audience because you're with your peers and you don't want to look foolish. But I tell you what, it's the most forgiving audience as well. And I'd much prefer a moment of embarrassment with my peers than the embarrassment in front of that big, important deal. Because that experience that we curate through every single interaction, no matter what channel it's on, is very predictive of whether that customer is going to buy from us. And bringing it back to me, Andrew, you mentioned this. Listen, if I don't trust your seller, I'm not going to put my head above the parapet. I'm not going to take the risk. I'm not going to defend to the hilt something that I have doubt with, because my credibility is on the line. And I want to make sure I'm making smart decisions for my company. In fact, I want to make sure I'm making decisions that are not only smart for the company, but also, continue to see me employed by the company. So we really shouldn't underestimate that. And look, there's a lot of data on it. Companies that have this culture of coaching and deliberate practice, on average, see a 27% increase in win rates. And that's the CSO Insights number. 27% increase in win rates. And when you've got a smaller funnel because fewer people are buying fewer things, and guess what? Your competitive set is not just your direct competitors and not just their, the wider circle, but it's every other strategic initiative that the company could invest in right now. You need to make sure that you've really nailed that, and that the people that are there in the moments that a decision is made are going to have your back. And we had an example literally yesterday. A deal that we've been working for 6 months plus, multi-threaded, above the line. We've done all the great stuff. And it went to the global leadership meeting for a decision yesterday. And long story short, the only reason that deal is now going to go ahead is that our, Andrew, we call them mobilizers, you call them champions. our mobilizer and champion was willing to back our corner with the CEO, the deputy CEO, and the other heads of regions. It would never have happened otherwise.
Yeah.
So practice, find your mobilizer, and drive that culture of coaching. It's free, it costs nothing, and the dividends are absolutely huge.
It's beautiful. I'm gonna tack onto this one. I feel pretty strongly about this one. In the last year, I think Chili Piper's leaned in to some of the differentiated motions within kind of our commercial practices, and namely what that looks like for us is we know there are less buyers buying less things out there, and accordingly, they're doing a lot more of their buying process is happening off of calls with salespeople. Right. So we've leaned into that. We've always believed in transparent pricing. We have our pricing published on our website. It's on our G2 page. You can book meetings directly with our salespeople from G2 pages and from our website. But we also made a couple commitments. Like we demo on the first call for every call. We have a demo call to action on our website. If you sign up for a demo, we believe you should get it. It's not to say that'll be the only demo you see from us, but we've really leaned into this bias of making the buying process quick and simple for people. And occasionally, like things like our no discount policy, we literally never discount. Occasionally there's pushback on that, but with the spirit in mind that we want you to come in as an educated buyer and get you through this process as quickly as you'd like to get through it. And some people will do evaluations that take 4 months. I think that's provided an advantage for us, specifically this year, when times have been tough, to still have deals that can move through the process in occasionally a week, which typically wouldn't happen otherwise. We've given ourselves an advantage by making sure that prospects know what they're getting into. They're going to get a demo from us. They already know their pricing from us, and that's been a big competitive advantage, something I wasn't used to before I came to Chili Piper almost 2 years ago, and one that I'm particularly grateful for in the past 4 quarters. It's worked out really well. So we're going to move into another question. The last year's obviously represented a lot of what I'll kindly refer to as volatility, and it's put a lot of strain on salespeople and sales orgs. And Andy, you just alluded to the importance, I think, of training. Like if you have less arrows, less salespeople, you need to make sure those arrows are sharp. But salespeople are notoriously sometimes averse to coaching. Occasionally they're defensive when it comes to coaching. So Puyan, we haven't gotten to you yet. How have you created a culture? We haven't started with you yet. How have you created a culture of collaboration, of teamwork, of coaching, of constant improvement?
Gosh, there's a lot to unpack there. One, to create that culture, I think first it starts with just having the right people. It's easy to say coach, but if the coaching isn't, well, obviously, assuming that the coaching is being done right? You're not yelling at people. It's actual effective coaching. It has to, there's only so many times you can say the same thing over and over again. You have to start seeing some improvement. So I would first and foremost, this is obvious, but I'll say it starts with the team, making sure you've got the right people for the right environment. Because that really has the biggest impact on culture more than anything else. So I would start with that assessment. But second, I do believe it starts from the top. And, I had, I was getting on a call with one of our reps that was, newer rep, couple weeks in, and him and I were going to do a call together. And, so I had the night before or 2 nights before, we did a little prep session, and I said, "How are you feeling about this call?" And he's like, "Well, I'm kind of scared." I'm like, it's me and my CEO on this call. And it's, when you're a smaller company, it's, as the leader, I think it's important to recognize that title does carry a lot of weight, even though you may not feel it. And you're just like, hey, we're all team members, whether it's a CEO, the VP, any leader. And so we just talk through it and we walk through it. And I said, "Well, what are you worried about?" And he's like, "Well, making a mistake if I don't get it right." And I said, "Well, just accept that you're going to make a mistake. No call is perfect." And I think I just opened up and said, "Listen, I was on a call last week and I watched the call recording, and here are 3 mistakes that I made. Here's how I caught them, and here's what I plan to do about it next time." And I've been doing this for quite a few years, and I'm still doing that, right? So I think just creating that environment where it's okay. There is no perfection, but there is this idea of let's help each other get better, give feedback to me. I'll ask my team for feedback on calls that I'm on. Hey, I probably spoke a little bit too much there. Wasn't as sharp on the thing that I did there. And I think just being vulnerable, being open to that, and kind of sharing that as a leader to the team. But then also making sure that you're providing that to the extent that support, that's saying, yeah, that didn't go as well, and that's okay, and here's what we're going to do about it next time, and let's just give it another shot. And I loved Andy's suggestion earlier about the role playing. Like we do that everything from the initial interview all the way throughout. That's really good.
Preach. I love sales leaders when they get on calls to be able to share both the good and the bad. I think it's really encouraging if you're an AE and you can see your VP of sales fumbling through the new product, fumbling through an objection. And then, of course, hopefully the next week, seeing that same VP of sales absolutely nailing a call. That's a way to get buy-in to coaching. That's a way to demonstrate that you can, most of us probably buy conversational intelligence, and you can share those calls. There's a library available to go through. That's the way to create an environment where people will share calls where they're uncertain about how they performed, rather than an environment where they only share the calls that they nailed or share the calls from closed won deals. And if anything starts from the top, I think it's this. All of us as sales leaders want to make an impact at the point of revenue. When you do, you damn well better make that call available for people to go listen to and learn from. So I think that those are good points. Andy, I'd love to hear from you on this.
So I'm going to go back a stage. And I agree with everything Puyan has said. Very, very powerful. I think there's a stage that sets people up for great coaching. Because here's the thing. I don't know about any of you guys on this call or the people in the audience. When I first became a sales manager, I wasn't a great coach. I'm not sure I'm a great coach now, to be honest. Others will judge that. But hopefully I'm a little bit less bad than I was, 20 odd years ago. Because most of the people get promoted into some sort of leadership have done so off the back of being a great individual contributor. And being a great individual contributor doesn't always require you to be a great coach. If you've got those skills, it's brilliant, particularly in more strategic sales, because you're coaching the sales teams around you, your colleagues, bringing them in, preparing them. But as a sales manager, we've got to practice being great coaches ourselves. We have to practice that individual skill. And one of the ways that we've found is particularly powerful in helping set sales leaders up for success is to give a framework of what good looks like. So what is expected? I spoke in my intro about the importance of when you're in front of a customer, understanding what you need to know, what you might want to say, what you might want to show, and what some of the things you might want to do. And let me unpack that. What do you need to know? Well, what is the role of this person? What sort of persona are they? And as that persona, what are some of the things that keeps them up at night? What are some of the problems and challenges that you can solve for that are relevant to them? But how does that fit in with the wider macro level? So you go in there and you have that point of view. You have an understanding and appreciation of, what they're doing every single day, and it helps you form that level of trust. The next level, what to say. Again, it's about there are ways that you can describe your value proposition without including jargon, and having those phrases available to you that you can bring naturally into a conversation is better done when you've practiced them in advance. Per Puyan's point, no call goes as planned. No call that I've ever been through has ever gone as we planned it in rehearsals. Never. Somebody throws a question, somebody doesn't turn up, somebody does turn up, and so it's understanding what are some of those core things that you can bring to the table, and then listening intently, comfortable in your knowledge, so that you can bring them up at the appropriate time. What to show. It's like, when do you bring in snippets of the demo? Tom, you talked about that. How do you weave that in the first call? What is it that you show, and how does that relate to the persona and the conversation that you've got? How do you bring up the demo and then come out of the demo so that you've then got face-to-face contact, particularly over tools like Zoom and Teams and the like? Don't have the slide up there all the time. And so for me, it's about, as if I want my leaders to coach well, I have to give them that rubric. I have to help my people understand what is expected in those moments and make it easy for them so that they aren't spending all of their time trying to make up their version of the value proposition or their version of what to say to a CFO. Because if you do that, you'll get tens, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of different versions. Some of them will be on brand. Some of them will be aligned to your company's value prop and your strategy. And many of them will maybe be somewhat suboptimal, right? So giving that coaching framework, actually taking deliberate time as a leadership to set that up, to provide that out to the field so the individual contributors know what to do. And then the coaches have a rubric to coach people against, that will give you consistency. And when you've got consistency, you'll see that reflected in your pipeline and ultimately in the customer experience that you drive.
Yep. That's beautiful. Andrew, I'm going to let you take us home on this question. How do you build a culture of sales effectiveness and collaboration and coaching?
Yeah, and I agree with everything that was just said. A couple of things to think about is like, the question you'll ask yourself, how do I know if I'm doing good coaching? Or how do you know if our coaching program is working? And for me, I'm always looking for our ICs, our sellers, our CSMs, or SDRs, whoever it might be, to start doing the coaching themselves. And what I mean by that is to show up after the call and say, hey, here are 3 things I think I could have done better. Here are 2 things that I would give you feedback on, and this is what I want to do next time. And that really is the culture that I think we're all striving for. It's what I'm looking for on a regular basis, right? If they can show up and provide the coaching to me, it makes my job and our managers' jobs that much easier because they have the right mindset, right? They see the culture that it's okay not to be perfect, and that perfect is not an expectation, but execution might be, right? Execution is what we're looking for. And so if you can get to that point, that's where you know what Andy was talking about, your framework of coaching is working. The top-down approach to, which was something I put in my notes that Puyon touched on, right? It needs to start at the top. And one thing I would add additionally is, like, as a sales leader, you do have to do some selling internally, right? You need to go sell how you want to go coach and how you want your sales team to perform and what your expectations are throughout the organization, right? You can't keep that in your silo. It can't just stay with you and then expect your CEO to fall in line or understand it. Like, you need to go educate them, him or her, how you want them to show up to the conversation, right? How you want them to coach. And the same thing goes throughout the organization of marketing, product marketing, your enablement leader. Like, you need to get everybody on board of what you're trying to build and how you're trying to coach. Because then I truly believe that's how you create great acceleration and great success within your organization. So I think those are things that are really important as a sales manager or sales leader. And if you're a sales manager and you don't feel like you're getting that framework, like, go work with your sales leader and help them understand that you feel like this is a gap, because everybody's moving quickly. Everybody has a lot of responsibilities, and sometimes people think, oh, of course I've outlined it, right? But, like, providing that feedback has to go both ways. Has to go down to the reps and has to go back up as well, especially if you're in that middle tier. And the last piece I would say around, like, coaching and opportunities, like, bring people together, right? Don't do the coaching opportunities just in silos. And what I mean by that is not just like, we're going to do a coaching moment with the AEs or a coaching moment with the CSMs. Bring those teams together. Because an SDR can glean something from a CSM in their call that they could use in their messaging, their positioning, their objection handling that they might get, and really foster that environment. And it's an expensive meeting, as I always like to say, like, gosh, it's an expensive meeting, having all these people in this room. But the feedback we get from our team when they're together, and the questions that SDR asks a CSM or an AE asks an SDR on, like, objection handling, prospecting, and how they overcome that, like, that creates that culture of, like, there's nobody in a role too high for coaching or for feedback, right? So again, everything these guys said, dead on, and a couple perspectives to think about for some of our attendees today.
Yeah, Andrew, that last piece just nailed it for me. Like, coaching and collaboration is not a one-to-one relationship. If the only person that is coaching you is your direct manager, that manager is doing themselves a disservice. Expose AEs calls to AMs for feedback. I myself occasionally, don't tell my boss, but on Wednesdays we do focus days, meaning no internal meetings. And you best believe that on Wednesdays at 4:00, I'm usually on the first tee with my AirPods in, listening to one call from an AE, a 45-minute call, and I can take notes on my phone to send back to them. And that ability to skip level, like I get to frankly use that time to work and do something wonderful, because that's what call coaching can kind of like provide for you. But that skip level opportunity for me to provide that feedback, or that opportunity for an account manager to provide feedback to an AE, they learn from one another, and you learn a lot of fresh perspectives. I think that's genius.
Yeah. One thing just another thing that kind of made me think about too, it's great boss of mine. He always used to say, "Are you playing chess or checkers?" And it's like, well, no, we're trying to play chess. And so when you think about like that deal collaboration and that coaching, like, you know, to what you were just saying, Thomas, what made me think about it, is it just me and my manager talking about this deal, or are we getting other coaching from other people?
Yep.
We know there's 5, 7, 10 buyers on the other side of this call or that next call. Does the team have visibility to where, you know, my VP can step in? Not that they need to be on the call, but add some coaching and some opportunity, or product marketing or whatever else. And so bringing that collaboration in real time, I think, is really critical and key as well. And I think you have to ask yourself, is it just me and my boss, or do I have my solutions engineer? Have we asked other people for some perspective and coaching on this opportunity as well? And that's how you get great ideas and start to find what I always talk about is like those blind spots. I always tell reps, I'm not going to show up to a call or a meeting prep and tell you everything, how great you figured everything out. Yes, I'm going to do that too, but I'm going to try to challenge us to find what we don't know, what our blind spots are, so that way we can show up in a better way. But again, sometimes it's inviting other people and other reps, like, hey, let's invite, you know, Andy to this call just so he can listen in and see if he can find a blind spot. That's great. And again, that collaboration going.
Well, team, we have just a couple minutes left here. So we're going to do a bit of a speed round. I think listening to this webinar today are probably a lot of frontline sales or revenue leaders who have had probably a challenging first half of the year for a number of them. We're just here over halfway through the year. So the question to all of you, take 30 seconds up to a minute. What advice would you give that group of folks to make sure they're in a better spot on January 1st of 2024 than they are where we sit here in July today? I'm going to start. Andy, you look inspired, so I'm going to start with you on this one.
I'm not sure whether I looked inspired or whether I was thinking deeply about the question. Probably the latter. I think it would be unusual if I didn't recap on some of the things that I've already talked about, and I think it's those things are timeless, right? We often talk about the next normal. What the new normal is. I'd argue there is no new normal. There's just a series of the next normals. But one thing as a sales leader that I think crosses all of those normals is your commitment to your people. I came into sales leadership for many reasons, but one of the biggest things that keeps me here is the people that I work with every day and seeing them grow throughout their careers, attain things that they never thought possible. And that comes through that relentless commitment to getting better. And it starts with the individual. I always hire for curiosity and coachability. Those are the two things I look for. If I've got those two, I can give them everything else. So for me, it's about a little bit better every single day. And the best way of doing that for the sales leaders on the call, the best way of going into next year in a better place than you're in at the moment, no matter how good you're at, you can get better, is committing to that culture of coaching. I don't know any sales leader right now that wouldn't give their right arm for an increase in win rates. Now, you might not get 20%, but hell, if you only get 10%, that's 10%, and that's hugely valuable. So commit to coaching. Not only will it help drive up your attainment, but it will also help very dramatically with your retention of your best talent. And none of us can afford to lose good talent in this market.
Brilliant. Andrew, to you.
Yeah, great perspective, Andy. I think a couple of things. I think one, you need to retro on what has gone well. Not everything has gone awful over the last 6 months, but find those 2 or 3 things that had the biggest impact for you and your team. and then try to figure out how you double down on those things as you go into the next 6 months. I think that's really, really important. I think what's most important though is to look back and what hasn't worked and what you need to do to change as a leader in order to bring the most out of your people. And then how do you really double down on those 2 or 3 things that you need to change, whether it be from coaching, your process, whatever it might be. But I think if you can, because as we all know, like change is the inevitable. And what the market looked like 6 months ago is going to look different in another 6 months. And so really figuring out what you're going to change, and from how you show up to like how you coach, to how you run deals, to trying new things, whatever it might be. And part of that process, which is the third thing, is getting that feedback from your sellers. Like go solicit feedback from, if you're the middle management, from your sellers, from your boss, and bring that together as a plan and present that to your team and show them like, this is how I'm going to show up and what we're going to do. And it's a great opportunity for them to do the same. And if you're sitting in an SVP CRO role, it's the same thing. I would ask your sellers, your managers, and yourself to give you that reflection of like what's going well. And so that way you can get people to follow and double down to set yourselves up for a great January kickoff or February, depending on your fiscal year, and the same for yourself. And I think that reflection shows that growth mindset in the coaching as well.
Very good. Puyan, you get the final word here. What should people be doing today to make sure that they're in a better spot on January 1st?
I have no idea, to be honest, because I have no idea like what the world is going to happen. I mean, honestly, the way that if things are going to change over the next 6 months in the way that they've changed in the last 6 months, like who knows? But in that world, with that backdrop, I come back to really 2 things. And I think this is a lot, I'd say, for the IC level, but I think it actually translates up really well to all levels, managers, directors, VPs, and heck, even C levels and founders. Hustle, grind. Like it is a very different environment now than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. You could get by with a little bit around the edges, but now it is radically different. And you may not know what's going to lead to success. In fact, most people don't right now. That's just the environment that everyone's operating in. And so I think if you're thinking a lot about what do you do in that type of a situation, it does go back to just work harder than others, hustle, grind it out, show that work to your team. A lot of times things aren't going to work, but if it doesn't work, at least say, hey, here are the things that we tried. And I don't think a lot of that was happening before. So this is a very different path than I'd say the coaching conversation we were having. But just that type of mindset, I think, is a very different, it's a mindset shift from how things were operating before. But connected to that, what's really important is learnings, right? So Andrew, I think you talked a lot about the coaching, and I think this is somewhat related to that. But share the learnings that you observe of what's working, what's not just with, hey, this call went well or what didn't, but what's actually happening in the sales process. What did you see? Hey, marketing released this thing and I'm seeing that's picking up and that's not. Maybe that wasn't happening as much before, but if I'm in any role right now, I'm going to be working harder than anybody else. I'm going to be sharing that work that I'm doing with my team, and I'm going to be sharing observations and learnings that I'm seeing, regardless of what level I'm at, because those learnings right now are critical to the whole organization to saying, well, how do we adjust in this type of environment?
It's perfect. Yeah, effort and learning both compound over time. So if I asked you what to do differently for August 1st, those things might not pay off such dividends. But certainly if you put those things in play for the next 6 months, I think you're in a good spot. I'd encourage people to look at their buyer journey and look at what steps in their buying process are serving their organization rather than the buyer. And work to optimize those things. Ways that you can make buying easier for folks, ways that you can make things that were previously behind lock and key available to prospects and customers without having to work through you. I think those things will pay dividends. You're not always going to see it. You're not always going to know what's happening. But I just firmly believe buyers are a lot more educated today than they were a year ago, let alone 5 years ago. And you can harness that power by making more available than you're used to. To this group, I want to thank you all so much for joining. To those watching, thank you for watching. What a privilege to chat with these 3 other gentlemen today. Thank you to Modern Sales Pros for hosting, and for all of you, happy selling for the next couple of quarters. We'll chat with you all soon. Be well. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.